Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. So much happening this week in Washington, D.C. Important developments in the fight for election integrity, led by President Trump with an extraordinary speech this week detailing previously unknown attempts, somewhat successful according to the president, by the Chinese to compromise our election systems. Here is President Trump given the headline. Let's go to him.
First, they show that over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening.
So let's go to the documents that the president referenced. They're available on the White House website. We'll provide a link to it. I tried to download it from the White House website, but the document wasn't opening. Detailing the data that was compromised by the Chinese, 220 million names. And included in that, or in addition to it, depending, I'm not sure what the counting is, there were additional 6 states where they downloaded the voting data completely, including the District of Columbia. So the Chinese, according to the intelligence community, have my voting data, and they probably have yours, odds are, based on how significant the data scraping and hacking or purchasing, however they got it, they got it. Here's the document, which you can download on the internet yourself. Maybe you'll have better luck downloading it than we did. We weren't able to open it. And there's a chart. It says unspecified U.S. voting data, 204 million records. Includes voter names, ages, phone numbers, addresses, etc. One U.S. state, the database was downloaded. Date of information 2017, 1.7 million names. A named U.S. state, 2 databases were downloaded, 7.8 million names. I think that was that North Carolina? I think that was North Carolina, if I recall. Named U.S. state number 3, 5.5 million names were downloaded. And then there were several states and the District of Columbia whose material was also downloaded seemingly separately. So 220 million names. They knew what had happened in July, or excuse me, in 2020, as President Trump highlighted. And they hid it from not only President Trump, but from Congress and, of course, you, dear American. This is another example of the deep state specifically hiding information from President Trump in a treasonous and seditious way. And it was a threefer in 2020. They lied about COVID origins because they didn't want to help Trump with his campaign against China related to COVID. Again, it was an election year. They lied that China had stolen your voter information, likely, because they didn't want to help Trump in an election year. And the CIA specifically helped the anti-Trumpers attack the Hunter Biden laptop story dishonestly, again, because they wanted to help Biden and hurt Trump in an election year. So we have 3 instances where the intelligence community, the deep state, and specifically the CIA, and at least 2 of them, if not 3 of them, were playing games in order to hurt Trump and elect Joe Biden in an election year. And my question is, given that conduct, just in that period of time, there's lots of other things they did wrong too, but I don't have time for that. My question to you is, why is it we still have a CIA? It's that corrupted. Same question for the FBI. They had a heavy hand in this too. And here are the documents showing that from the White House material that was released last night. And here's some back and forth. You may have seen it online already, but it's, you know, maybe you're not like a lunatic like I am, reading all this stuff immediately. So I pulled some of it out for you. Here's one official writing, complaining. I think I mentioned to you before that there is some pending blank that makes it clear China has been caught conducting election influence. At least that's how it was described to us. But if you scroll up, note that NSA deliberately massaged our one pending PDB to avoid any direct links to the election. There you go. National Security Agency is deliberately massaging our one pending PDB, which is the Presidential Daily Brief, the document orally and used to brief, and it's obviously a document that's used to brief the President of the United States and senior leadership of our civilian government. And they hid the information about China's efforts and the possible consequences of them securing 220 million names, voter information from various sources. And this is part of what looks like to be a comprehensive Chinese effort to compile data on all of you in the United States. And the problem with them compiling voter data is that it gives them the ability to mess with our elections. And we wouldn't even know it. You wouldn't even know it. I mean, you hear these stories about people going to vote. Well, someone says I already voted. Well, now we know potentially how that happened. You may not even know it happened, my point is. You could be voting in 2 states, given the data that China has on you. And the media doesn't know what to do with this. And I knew it was big news based on the left was like getting very nervous about what was going to come out of President Trump's speech. They accused him of lying, all sorts of kind of crazy, irrelevant, non-responsive complaints about what he was going to say, even though they didn't know what he was going to say. And so he went online, or went and gave this speech. Big media censored him. CBS censored him. ABC, NBC refused to cover the speech. CNN, I think, turned away from it, didn't cover the speech as well. I think only Fox and C-SPAN covered it fully. And he gave information out, and what was the media's response? All sorts of fake fact checks and, again, non sequitur complaints about what he said. China stole 220 million voter files, and the response from the media was, well, you didn't say they changed votes with it. What's going on in this world? It's like Alice in Wonderland. It's like a little kid saying, you know, you catch a little kid stealing something, and they say, well, I didn't use it. I didn't use the money I stole from you. Are you kidding me? But that's the level of idiocy and dishonesty and disingenuousness we face from the left media and the Democratic Party, who, for whatever reason, I don't say this to be partisan, but it's the reality, are crazed about pretending that our elections are conducted honestly when 80 to 90% of Americans think they're defective in key ways. Voter ID, citizenship verification, the Save America Act. So we've got this election crisis that has been hidden from us for years by the same government who told us the elections are secure. They're presumptively not secure as a result of what China did. And, you know, President Trump is rightly upset about it. He's not only concerned about the deep state seditious conspiracy against him, but the fact that on top of everything else, it's easier for China to manipulate the elections At least that's the conclusion I draw, because our systems, our electronic voting systems, our election systems are a joke when it comes to security. And here's President Trump demanding justice and exposing our election security fails.
Today, I'm asking the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA to investigate how and why such crucial information was hidden, to fire those involved in the cover-up, and to file criminal charges, if appropriate, against these people. Yet concealing China's meddling was only the beginning. The third set of documents we are releasing proves that for many years, Americans were blatantly lied to about the security of our election infrastructure, including electronic voting machines and ballot counting systems. Dishonest, almost all. They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that.
So, the president's right to want accountability. The challenge I think we have is that in the end, it's the people, I shouldn't say the people because it's different leadership now. It's the institutions, the agencies responsible for the corruption and the criminality that the president's asking to investigate the corruption and criminality that institution did. So the FBI is going to investigate the FBI. The DOJ is going to investigate the DOJ. The CIA is going to investigate the CIA. The NSA is going to investigate the NSA. The Office of Director of National Intelligence is going to investigate itself. Now, it doesn't mean the leadership can't be trusted to do the investigation, but the problem is the leadership isn't doing the investigation. And I don't mean in the sense there's no investigation that will be done. I mean, they personally aren't doing it. Someone else is going to be doing it. So the deep state actors are going to be doing the investigation of the deep state conspiracy that further destroyed the legitimacy of the 2020 election. And I think the legitimacy was significantly undermined as it is. But not only of the 2020 election, but every election since then and in the near future. And I think the President of the United States should appoint a special counsel that reports to him, doesn't report to DOJ, doesn't report to FBI, it reports to him. He's the chief magistrate to get to the bottom of this. Not only on this issue, but all the other corruption issues. I know our friend Joe Geneva is down there in Florida with a grand jury. Make him report to President Trump. And this isn't a smear on Todd Blanche or Kash Patel or whoever. It's just the agencies are compromised. And the response to his concerns about the election security were fake fact checks. I thought the media was getting away from that since they're so embarrassing, but evidently not. And I kind of battled directly with CBS News about it on Twitter, or X, because they immediately posted this fact check. Margaret Brennan, an activist reporter at CBS, said, CBS fact check on voting machines. Look at this garbage. Trump claim on voting machines. They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that. Okay, and then she says, this claim likely refers to a document declassified by the government that mentions voting machines in Venezuela. No. The document that is referenced here is a CISA document, this Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency or something like that. I don't even think there should be a CISA because it was used to censor us. But they investigated the voting systems. So let me take a step back here. So that's like a fake fact check. Prior to 2020, and and Judicial Watch has been doing election integrity work for decades. It was widely accepted by the left, the right, Democrats, Republicans that we don't trust electronic voting machines. The internet's not secure. It's inherently an unsecure process. and we don't like them, we don't trust them. Now, so what happened? States, with the help of the federal government, just bought all these machines that essentially were not secure enough by any reasonable measure. And CISA, in this report that was just released yesterday, exposed specifically just how awful things were. And this is how I responded to that fake fact check. I said, fact check, CBS News fact check is false in all material respects. DHS report released shows CISA team took control of election system networks in hours or days, demonstrating that, quote, many remain soft targets incapable of stopping even moderately skilled adversaries. So here's the section of the report that was issued by the White House and the Department of Homeland Security. Election systems in SLTT, which I believe is short for, I have it here, state, local, tribal, and territorial networks. So basically are America's election systems. Election software is deployed into state, local, territorial, and tribal systems. They're managed networks that frequently lack the defensive maturity assumed in vendor threat models. Across numerous penetration tests and red team engagements, CISA observed recurring structural weaknesses in those networks. So what's going on is the election systems have their own networks. So pick a state out of the blue. Missouri. They have the Missouri election system. They have the Missouri election network, and they put their programs on the network. And the networks are essentially open to bad guys. Flat or minimally segmented networks, allowing lateral movement from standard enterprise zones, email servers, line of business applications, into election-related environments. So people are on the network doing their email, and if you have access to your email, you can have access to the email, to the election system that's also on the network. And those of you who are computer security professionals, I appreciate your input on what CISA is saying here. And I don't know much about computer security other than as a layman, but I understand enough to know this is obviously weak system security. Weak identity and access management, including poor enforcement of multi-factor authentication, shared credentials, and inadequate service account hygiene. So what does that mean? Multi-factor authentication is the bane of many of us. You go in to sign into something and they send you, okay, we're sending you a code to your phone or to your email, input it before you sign in. Evidently, that isn't a basic security requirement on some election systems. Shared credentials, sharing passwords, sharing access information. So one person has access and they're telling someone else, you can come in under my account, or that's effectively what's happening. An inadequate service account hygiene, I interpret that to mean that old accounts, old access is not being cleaned, so someone leaves, they may still have access to said election systems. Again, this is the most secure election system in the country, in the world. And they don't do Security 101 when it comes to the networks running our election systems. Lack of endpoint hardening, including outdated OS versions, insufficient event logging, and unmonitored administrative interfaces. So I see that as, I don't know exactly what all that means. I know enough to think it means their kind of watchdogging of what's going on in the system is weak, on the systems is weak. And they don't know who's coming in and coming out, and if there's an issue that pops up security-wise, they're not even alerted to it. Legacy remote access and file transfer pathways that remain reachable from segments that should be isolated. Well, that sounds dangerous. Again, it's basically leaving back doors into your systems. insufficient monitoring of network traffic, preventing detection of adversary activity. So someone could be coming in and stealing stuff and they wouldn't know, even though if they had network activity tracked in a professional way, they would be able to see it. In multiple cases, CISA assessors gain full network control within hours or days, demonstrating that many partners remain soft targets incapable of stopping even moderately skilled adversaries. So according to DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, the agency responsible for monitoring our election systems, because they're part of our national security infrastructure, many election systems are wide open to penetration by our adversaries, incapable of stopping even moderately skilled adversaries. Most states have moved away from paperless electronic voting machines because those systems don't provide a physical record or give voters a way to ensure their selections were recorded accurately. The replacement paper voting systems also contain vulnerable components. In 2020, ImageCast X-ballot marking devices printed voters' completed ballots on paper, but encoded their selections in a barcode that voters had no way to verify. The researchers showed that hackers could change the votes encoded in the barcode without even having physical access to the machines. So they tell you they're reforming it by allowing you to have a receipt or a paper copy of your ballot or whatever, and that's no guarantee. This is an election security crisis. The Chinese have your voting information. Our systems are unsecure from attack by hackers, sovereign interests like the Chinese, whoever. And we have an entire political and media class that refuse to do anything about it because Trump. Patriotism goes out the window. Democracy goes out the window. Protecting America goes out the window. National security goes out the window. Your privacy goes out the window. Your civil rights related to voting goes out the window. All because these people hate Trump, they hate conservatives, and dare I say it, they kind of like this. Because they don't like elections, they want to end them. They just not only want to cheat at them, they want to end them. And right now, the Chinese looks like, if they wanted to, could wreak havoc on our elections. And who knows what they've done, because we don't have a good way of tracking it. We're just whistling past the graveyard on it. You know, and there are lots of other things that came out, and I could go on and on about it, but I encourage you to look at the full material and watch the president's speech in toto. They talk about the fact that there was this Michigan scam that was going on in terms of fraudulent voter registrations, bribery associated with the voter registrations, and the FBI and the Biden gang dropped it. There's information about 20,000, the Chinese moving in fraudulent voters, driver's licenses, so their agents could vote in the election for Biden. It's not clear whether it happened, but they didn't want to pursue it. So what's interesting about this is that many of the issues that President Trump talked about last night, we kind of had an idea about, other than the 220 million voters whose identity or voter information and private information was stolen by the Chinese. Like the 20,000 licenses issue, that was been reported on. The vulnerability of election systems, that's been reported on. They can change your vote on these election systems. And the challenge is, because there was talk in these documents about Venezuela doing it, the regime in Venezuela changing changing election outcomes, votes on the machines, saying, well, that doesn't mean it happened in the United States. What it shows is that same system, to the degree it's used in the United States, shows that it's vulnerable, that the systems are vulnerable to having vote data change, voting information or tabulations changed. So our friend John Solomon, you've seen him on Just the News, former AP reporter, he went over to the White House as a special government employee to help President Trump with a transparency initiative. So a lot of this material has been kind of like sitting in offices here in D.C., and the president brought John in, and Rode heard, evidently, this is how I'm interpreting it. They probably would tell you otherwise how it came to be. But my impression is they had someone like John, who shares our views on these transparency issues, come in. He knew generally about these stories, found out even more than he knew, and he had the ear of the president to move this material along and make it public and declassify it. How do I know they've been sitting on this? Because we sued for records like this. We didn't get, some of these records should have been given to us a decade ago. So we sued the Office of Director of National Intelligence after Tulsi Gabbard, who stepped away as director, issued a statement. This is the statement that she said. In an April 2025 White House cabinet meeting, Gabbard indicated that voting machines are susceptible to hacking and capable of changing votes. We have evidence of how these electronic voting systems have been vulnerable to hackers for a very long time and vulnerable to exploitation to manipulate the results of the votes being cast. And so what Judicial Watch did, we said, oh, we saw what you said. Give us all the documents about that. And so we sued in October. So we've been asking for these records for a long time, almost a full year. And we finally got the records recently. And this is what the key record is. So Gabbard had set up a working group, and the Directors Initiatives Group, they called it. And this is what the talking points about, because they were going to try to publicize what they found. And this is what they had found. The group had uncovered indications of bias and politicization within the intelligence community's election security assessment. Specifically, the group has uncovered indications that intelligence community, redacted, has identified election system vulnerabilities that could be exploited by our adversaries and proceeded to withhold or blank this information from the American people. So they knew something was happening a year ago. And as always with too many administrations, and it happens with the Trump administration, they just can't get their act together to get the full information out there. And it took the intervention of the President of the United States with John Solomon, who heard, as I said, on the agencies who had these records to get the information. The group supposedly is working overtime, interviewing whistleblowers and reviewing documents necessary to declassify election-related IC products, intelligence community products. They were looking into, for example, working with DOJ, looking specifically into foreign influence, election interference, counterintelligence, corruption, money laundering, and drug trafficking. So they knew something was going on, and it took a full year for it to get out. We got some indications of it, last week through this. I don't know if it was last week, but just recently, because they gave us a few documents. And let me respectfully suggest, if these agencies were as committed to transparency as they're supposed to be, this material would have come out last year. It wouldn't have taken literally the President of the United States to get it out. Zero excuses for this. So forgive me for getting a little bit upset. The Chinese have compromised their elections because they have the voting records and data of 220 million voters that can be used or could have been used to manipulate our elections, change outcomes, rig them. The data also shows in the material that was released the Chinese wanted Joe Biden to win. That's no surprise. His family was on the take from him. So what's to be done? I already said one thing, there needs to be a special counsel. But I think given the data compromise by the Chi-Coms, there are a few issues that come to the fore, and they kind of help clarify the importance of Judicial Watch's work. So, as you know, Judicial Watch has taken steps to clean our election rolls. We, in various lawsuits and legal actions, have caused the removal of 6 million names from the voter rolls, dirty names from the voter rolls. Most recently, Oregon, Colorado. A few years ago, it was 1.2 million out of maybe 1.6, doesn't matter, out of LA County, cleaned up. New York, nearly 1 million names cleaned up. We have a lawsuit now in California, I'll talk more about it, trying to clean up 1 million more names. But it heightens the importance of cleaning our voting lists because they have access to voting lists, the Chinese do. And if we're not cleaning the lists, they can have a name from 2017 or 18 or 19 or whenever, because many voting registration lists still are publicly available. We got to get those names off the rolls as soon as we can under law, because the Chinese can use those old names. So cleaning voting rolls is not only a federal issue in terms of following federal law, an election integrity issue, but it's a national security issue. Our national security is at stake when you have a foreign government like China essentially having almost incredible opportunities to rig our elections because of data they've unlawfully took from us. And it heightens the necessity of voting in person. If you don't want a Chi-Com voting for you improperly, a key way to mitigate that possibility or make it less of a chance, make it harder to do that, is to have systems in place where people show up to vote. They don't vote by mail. They show up to vote. Here's my voter ID. Oh yes, I've already verified I'm a citizen. That's been done. So the Save America Act needs to get passed. And I would argue there may be some national security issues related to not having a voter ID, having election systems that are essentially jury-rigged in terms of having credible security standards in place to prevent them from being manipulated by outsiders, that the president may have to step in to secure our election systems and require voter ID and citizenship verification. It may be a national security issue. I read this material, and I'm deadly serious about this. I'm concerned whether we can trust our election systems for any election, let alone the upcoming one. And what to do about that? Show up and vote in person, use paper ballots, do what we used to do as a country, do what other countries still do. And I know what the left said, oh, it's too hard, too many people. No, it isn't too hard. States run elections. There's no state that can't handle this if they want to get it done right. But some states, they don't want to do it right. They don't want to clean their rolls. They don't want to have voter ID. Federally, we have no sufficient check to make sure non-citizens aren't voting. They just have to pinky swear, oh yeah, I'm a citizen, and they sign and they can register to vote. I mean, it's illegal, but there's no check on that. And indeed, Americans support this. They want voter ID. They want citizenship verification. 80, 90% of Americans want those. Congress can't get it done. And it's Republicans as much as Democrats don't want to do it. Is it all Republicans? No. But if Republicans wanted national voter ID and citizenship verification, it would be done. President Trump wants it done. The House has passed it at least twice, I think. But there's a group in the Senate that just doesn't want to take the steps necessary to get it passed. So, a few things. Support Judicial Watch, because the work we're doing now has a national security component in terms of protecting elections. And call your senators, call your members of Congress to get the Save America Act passed. You need voter ID. We need to ban transposing words. We need to ban mail-in balloting virtually in its entirety. Now, I know there are exceptions, but the exceptions prove the rule. We need citizenship verification. And those are the core components of the Save America Act. So this isn't a partisan issue. This is an American issue. If you're a patriot, you want to protect our elections from the Chi-Coms. And I think the expectation should be that Republicans and Democrats both treat this as the national security emergency it is. We have an election security crisis right now. The President of the United States announced it quite persuasively. And despite all the noise you hear saying, oh, you know, we hate Trump, we hate Trump, we hate Trump, from the left, because that's all, it's almost like a Pavlov response. Someone says Trump and they go crazy. No one has suggested, for example, that the Chinese didn't take those 220 million voter information files. No one has suggested that wouldn't be potentially dangerous to our system of government and our elections. And what are they going to do about it? They're hoping you don't notice, and they just want to, both parties, more or less, don't want to do anything prior to the election. The Democrats got their commies they're dealing with. The Republicans are afraid of their own shadow. And this is where voters need to take leadership, citizens need to take leadership, and the president obviously has been pushing this. Call your members of Congress, 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121, and share your views. And in the meantime, Judicial Watch will continue to do its extraordinary heavy lifting to get to the bottom of what is probably a mountain related to the disclosures this week, and doing essential work that no one else is doing to protect our elections. Further demonstrating Judicial Watch's leadership in the area of election security, clean elections, fair, honest elections, you name it, the Trump Justice Department filed a motion in court this week, in federal court, to intervene in Judicial Watch's massive lawsuit to clean up 873,000. That's right, 873,000. It's probably closer to 1 million, but those are the numbers we're getting from California, to clean up 873,000 dirty voting names off the voter rolls in California. And the Justice Department looked at our allegations. They are as concerned about them as we are because they're based on admissions by the state, information they share with the federal government on their voter registration data. And they said, we want to join too, the Justice Department did, to enforce the law, the National Voter Registration Act, and another federal law, the Help America Votes Act. I think it's called Help America Voting Act, which only they can enforce. We can't enforce it privately. Yeah, the Help America Vote Act. The Justice Department, as I said, is right, following Judicial Watch's lead, and to join our fight to clean up California's dirty voting rolls. The Justice Department is on target in calling California's voting rolls among the worst in the nation, and our lawsuits and legal actions have already caused the removal of 6 million dirty voter names from the rolls. Another million or so must be cleaned further in California. So we welcome the Justice Department's effort to intervene here. The court will obviously consider, hopefully grant it. I'm done predicting what courts are going to do these days since I was so sorely disappointed with that horrible decision by the Supreme Court in our Election Day case. So even if I think we're going to win, I'm not going to tell you because I don't trust the judges, or I don't trust myself to be fair to the judges. I don't trust myself to accurately predict what they're going to do sometimes. So we're representing Don Wagner, who's a candidate for office in California, against Shirley Weber, who is the Secretary of State in California. The Justice Department's proposed complaint and intervention names California Secretary of State Shirley Weber as a defendant and states the intervention was filed to enforce provisions of the National Voter Registration Act and the Help America Vote Act of 2002. Federal law, I want you to pay attention to this, requires most inactive voter registrations to be removed after 2 general federal elections. So they have forever and a day to remove the names once they know they're gone. People have moved or died. They don't do it. Judicial Watch's federal lawsuit alleges that over 873,000 California voter registrations have remained continuously inactive for at least 3 federal elections. And some for much longer. This is what makes the China compromise so bad, because they have names that could potentially vote if China knew what they were doing. They're so old. Of these registrations, 326,000 have remained continuously inactive through at least 3 consecutive federal elections. So that's 6 years. 151,000 have remained inactive through at least 4 consecutive general elections. 33,000, it's actually nearly 34,000, have remained continuously inactive through at least 5 consecutive federal elections, dating back at least 10 years. Before the 2016 federal election, they've got people who have been dead or moved away for 10 years. They don't want to remove them. Not to mention the issue of having non-citizens on the voter rolls. Because one of the things that President Trump highlighted this week is that they've done an analysis, DHS has, of voter databases to the extent they've been able to, because the leftists don't want to cooperate, and they've been helped by anti-Trump judges who are completely out of control these days. They found, for example, in California, as many as 190,000 people are on the rolls who are aliens. They're illegally registered to vote. So at least 190,000 names need to be checked out to make sure they're citizens. In addition, there are 800,000 plus names, nearly 900,000, that are just dead names, meaning they're not active, but they are zombie names in the sense that they can still be used to vote in an election. Because a name is inactive, it doesn't mean they can't be used to vote. They're still registered to vote. They're still registered voters. Inactive is just a name, is just a category that the states have come up with to justify their failure to clean up the list. Oh, that's an inactive name. They don't get a ballot. It doesn't matter if they don't get a ballot, because they still can vote. They can ask for a ballot. Someone in their name could ask for a ballot. Some Chi-Com can ask for the ballot. Update the address. Get the ballot mailed there. This is a national security issue. The Chinese, it seems, have open access to our voter data. And when you have this mass mail-in balloting, when you have dirty voting lists, the threat from that is exponentially increased. So everyone says, what's going to be done about President Trump's speech, what he found? I tell you what, Judicial Watch is doing the most effective thing possible about it right now, cleaning up the voting names, cleaning up the voting lists. Those are fewer opportunities for voter fraud every time a name is removed, thanks to Judicial Watch. And we've removed 6 million. Our lawsuit settlements, our legal actions. The lawsuit in California was filed on behalf of Don Wagner. He works, he's an elected member of the Orange County Board of Supervisors. He's a candidate for the California Secretary of State. And we're representing the American Independent Party, a third party in California as well that's pretty influential. We're assisted by the Benbrook Law Group in Sacramento. And just so you know, Judicial Watch doesn't do some of this work alone. We often rely on local counsel that we partner with. Those of you who are, I'm not a lawyer, but those of you who are lawyers will know you need local counsel. You go and sue in California, and it's good to have sometimes local counsel, even if we do have lawyers who are barred in the various states. It's good to have people who are there on the ground helping us with the litigation that we're engaged in. So we're always grateful for these other lawyers out there. So there are all these kind of people who don't get enough credit in our litigation and our great work. In April 2026, Judicial Watch settled with Oregon. They're removing 800,000 names from the voting rolls. Colorado recently removed 372,000 eligible names thanks to Judicial Watch lawsuit and settlement. In Kentucky, state election board officials reported roughly 735,000 ineligible voter registrations have been removed from voter rolls as part of a 2018 consent decree that Judicial Watch had entered into with the state, the Commonwealth. I guess Kentucky's Commonwealth, right? As part of the 2022 settlement, New York City alone has removed 918,000 ineligible names from its rolls. We cleaned up rolls in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and we have an active lawsuit to clean up probably 1 million more names in Illinois. And more's coming. So what do you think? What do we got to do? Got to get the Save America Act passed. We need to make sure that the crooks in the deep state who tried to destroy our republic by rigging the election to help Joe Biden are pursued, prosecuted where appropriate, and justice be done there. And we got to get Judicial Watch support. You've got to give us support. I'll be blunt. If you're already doing it, thank you. But without this support, we wouldn't have these lawsuits to clean up the rolls. The Justice Department is now finally showing up. We're grateful for Harmeet Dillon, our friend, and Todd Blanche, the incoming Attorney General. I watched his testimony this week, and it's pretty clear the Democrats didn't know what to do with him, so he's going to be the Attorney General, barring an act of God or something. But you need to support Judicial Watch because we are the leader on election integrity. We are the leader in uncovering the government corruption and sedition, demanding access to this information, pressuring it, pressuring the courts, pressuring through the courts for access to the information, and using the courts to clean up the rolls and enforce election laws otherwise. And thank God President Trump is personally interested in this transparency issue. And that's why these documents were released as well. So go to Judicial Watch's website, give us your most generous contribution. It's a charitable contribution. It's tax deductible under law. And if you've already supported us, wonderful. And I encourage you, I hope you feel vindicated through your support and encouraged to support us again. Because if Judicial Watch isn't doing the heavy lifting, I fear it's simply not going to be done. It's not going to be done. So this has been a terrifically significant week for election integrity, our anti-corruption efforts, and America, our elections need saving. And I can't implore you enough to take action, to support Judicial Watch, let Congress know what you think about the Save America Act, and frankly pray for God's protection for our system of government, which is under assault in so many ways and variations. So thanks for joining us this week. As always, we'll be here next time with you on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.